Hi friends, welcome back to the channel. It is the end of another month, so that means it is time to debrief all the books that I read in July. I'm very happy to say that I think overall July was a pretty successful month. I managed to get through quite a few books, a mixture of genres, and quite the various ratings as well. So I think we're gonna have a lot to debrief on today. While we're at the start of the video, I do want to say a big thank you. We did just hit over 1,000 subscribers, which was a huge accomplishment. This was my end of the year goal, so I am so ecstatic that we already hit it, and thank you guys so much for subscribing and being here. Whenever I saw that we officially hit it, I was out of town, but Hunter surprised me whenever I got home with some balloons and everything, and it was so cute. But something I want to do to celebrate with you guys is some type of special video, something we can incorporate in the video, something that we can celebrate all together. So if you guys have any ideas, let me know. Originally I was thinking a Q&A, but if that's not what you guys are into, I am open to other suggestions. So with that fun announcement out of the way, let's go ahead and talk about some reading stats. Overall in July, I did read 9 books in total. The breakdown of genres was 5 romances, 3 fantasy, and 1 dystopian. For the 8-book TBR that I set, I managed to get to 6 out of the 8 books. My average rating this month was very middle of the road. It was around a 3.4. And for my total number of pages, I read 3,683 pages in total. And for a quick little preview of what books we have in store, I realized I slacked last month and did not include my Fable wrap-up as well. But here's a quick little visual representation of what I managed to get to. So before we go into detail, make sure to go down below, like, subscribe so that you don't miss any of our upcoming videos, and let's talk about the books I read in July. The start of this month, I was fully in my Libby new release era. I just had back-to-back books come in through my library, which I was very grateful for. But that started off with Great Big Beautiful Life by Emily Henry. But obviously, as a huge Emily Henry stan, I was very excited for this new release. I did go in with the expectations that this was going to be much more women's fiction leaning, just a subplot of romance. And even though I went in with those expectations, I do think overall this book severely disappointed me. I settled on a 3 stars for this, and I will say I am probably being just a little bit generous with that one. Within this story, we follow Alice as she travels to a small town in Georgia for the opportunity to interview and write a book for this old Hollywood starlet, Margaret Ives. Now, once she gets there, she actually realizes that she's going to need to compete for the opportunity to share Margaret's story with a fellow author, Hayden. Once they realize that these two are going to be competing against each other, Margaret gives them both a month to interview and give her a preview of the books they want to write. And at the end of the month, she will choose who's the winner and gets the opportunity to write the book. From there, how the book is structured is we get kind of a dual timeline where one, we go through all of Margaret's family's history and the drama that ensued to document the rise and fall of this family in Hollywood. We also get the present day timeline where not only Alice is interviewing Margaret, but she's also developing a relationship with Hayden. And I will say, I think I do have a little bit of an unpopular opinion in that I did enjoy Margaret's family's history and story a little bit more than the present day chapters. I overall just found that the relationship development between Alice and Hayden really didn't work for me. I felt like it started basically out of nowhere and it felt very insta-love to me, which is shocking to say because I feel like generally Emily Henry shines in her romance development, but for some reason these two really didn't do anything for me. I have to say that this is easily my least favorite book that she's ever written, and it does just make me extra sad because I didn't really love her release last year, Funny Story, either. So I'm really holding out hope on her release for next year and that we do something a little bit different. I really didn't mind the fiction tone that we took to this one. I wish that we just kept the romance completely out of it, and I probably would have liked the story a whole lot more. From there, I had another very disappointing new release. This was a tough way to start the month because then I read It's a Love Story by Annabel Monaghan, which this is my 3rd book by Annabel Monaghan. Overall, I do really enjoy her writing. She is a perfect author for the summertime. Her books are always very short and sweet. And within the story, we're following Jane, who was a child actress. Now within her 30s, she is a movie executive in LA, and she's desperately trying to get her first movie greenlit. However, the interest in her movie isn't exactly what she hoped for. So in a moment of desperation and panic, she just ends up lying to her team and saying that she can get a previous co-star and current music sensation on board for the project and do an original soundtrack for this movie. Now the problem is she has not kept in contact or spoken to her co-star in 20 years, and she ends up being forced to work with her work rival Dan to try and get in contact with him and get him on board for this movie. So we follow Jane and Dan for this week-long adventure in Long Island trying to track down her previous co-star. And I think just about every part of this book didn't work for me. I didn't love Jane. I didn't love the relationship dynamic between her and Dan, and I really didn't enjoy the whole plot around her lying and being in this panic to try and track down this previous co-star. So overall, I ended up giving this a 2.5 stars. Within all of those things that I mentioned that I didn't enjoy, the strongest one by far was our FMC Jane. As I referenced earlier, she was in her 30s. However, her characterization was so immature and childish. There was multiple points in the story where she would feel very overwhelmed, and she literally would either hide under her desk at her work, or if she was at home, she would go hide in her closet. Additionally, in moments of being overwhelmed, she would always have to like grab a candy bar as if she was literally 6 years old, and her socialization with the other characters around her just felt so off to me. I just didn't end up connecting to her whatsoever. It felt like our author was really trying to make her feel quirky, and overall I was just left with feeling that she was completely unrealistic. I do have to say that the actual writing within this book is the same as Annabel Monaghan's other books, where it's just like very simple, to the point, not super flowery language, and usually I like that. However, something about this book just felt totally stilted, and I ended up just not connecting to it whatsoever. After that huge disappointment, luckily I was able to get to one of my best books of the month, which was Sunrise on the Reaping by Suzanne Collins. I feel like I really don't even need to do a summary of this book. I think this has taken over the book community, but this is the next installment in the Hunger Games saga, where we are finally receiving Hamish's story. And I was shocked by how much detail we really got of Hamish's story. We see him the morning of the reaping, the training, the games, and life after the games. So we get a very comprehensive look at Hamish and how he came to be what we see in those first 3 books. I did hear a lot of people encouraging you to do a complete reread of the series before going into this one. While I think that is an amazing idea, I ended up just doing a rewatch of the movies, and I felt like I got what I needed out of that. I had read the original 3 books in the Hunger Games saga whenever I was a kid. I did opt to just skip reading The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes and just go ahead and watch that movie instead. But I felt like that was a nice little refresher. And I do think it is worth seeing Snow's story before reading Hamish's, because Snow's lore and how he came to be have a very direct impact on Hamish, and specifically his love interest from home. I had heard everyone giving this 5 stars, and while I do think this is a great book, definitely worth the read, I ended up settling on a 4.25 stars with this one. It followed a lot of the same beats that we see within book 1 and 2 of Katniss's story, so I don't really feel like anything that we saw throughout this book took me overly by surprise. Also, the love interest that Hamish has from home, we only see like 1 scene with her before he's shipped off to the games, and so I wasn't really fully immersed in their relationship dynamic and their history, and I felt like there was just grossly too many songs throughout the book as well. I did also hear some of this book through the audiobook, and the songs just really weren't working for me in that format at all. So I think because of the lack of shock I felt, lack of connection to his love story, and not liking the songs as much, it did knock my rating down just a little bit. But overall, I do still think this is a fantastic book, and I loved getting to learn more about Hamish's story. Now, by this point, I was already halfway through the month, and none of the books I had read were on my TBR. So I did do a 24-hour readathon where I focused on getting through my July TBR, which I will make sure to link above. And these next few books I either read or introduced throughout that video. The first one being A Torch Against the Night by Sabaa Tahir. This is book 2 in the Ember Quartet, where we mainly follow Laia and Elias. Laia is a scholar within this world, and the scholars are currently being oppressed by the Martial Empire. Elias is a soldier in the Marshall Empire Training Academy, and as Leia goes undercover as a spy at the training academy, the story of these two converge in a very unlikely pairing, and we see their relationship grow from there. Now, I will say that this is quite a dark fantasy series because the world is very violent and cruel. Even though there is the smallest romance subplot, I really wouldn't go in here thinking that this is going to be a romantasy. This is very much fantasy forward. And I do think overall I liked this book just a little bit more than book one because our world did expand and we did also get an additional POV, which is Helene. Now in book one, Helene was definitely not one of my favorite characters, but getting to know her background and her family dynamics really does put a lot into perspective for her character. And I'm really excited to see where that goes in book 3 and 4. I've ended up giving both books in the series so far a 4 stars, and I think these would be great to pick up in either the fall or winter time. Overall, for this to receive a higher rating, I wish just like a little bit more had happened within it. I do think it took quite a while for us to get to the point in this story, but I think we have a lot to work with in the upcoming installment within the series, which I do have on my August TBR and I'm very excited to get to. And that's where I'll leave it at that, because since this is book 2 in the series, I don't want to overshare. I don't want to spoil anything for you guys, but if you are a fantasy girly, I would definitely go ahead and add this to your TBR. Now from there, we took a very different direction with the readathon, and I went ahead and picked up Beg, Borrow, or Steal by Sarah Adams. I do think this is probably my favorite book of this month, which I really wasn't expecting because this is book 3 in the When in Rome Interconnected series. And the series has been all right for me. Overall, it's been a little bit mediocre, but something about this relationship dynamic really did it for me. I ended up giving this a 4.25 stars. And within this, we have a rivals to lovers forced proximity romance between 2 second grade teachers turned neighbors. Emily and Jack had a terrible first impression in college, and from there it just continued to go downhill for them, even though life keeps bringing them back together. And them being forced in the same room together is just so funny because their banter is playfully hostile, and I would say seriously funny. I don't often laugh out loud at books, but I was totally giggling at the scenes between these two. This does have a little bit extra spice than Sarah Adams books normally have, but by no means would I go into this thinking that this is an overly spicy book. I would definitely recommend that you pick up the series, and I'm very excited to see book 4, which should be the final book in the series, come out at the very end of this year. From there, we were in the thick of the 24-hour readathon, and I picked up the CoOp by Tara DeWitt. Now, I did go into this book a little bit hesitantly because my first book by Tara DeWitt, which was Savor It, I didn't fully love. Now, I am happy to say that I definitely liked this one a bit more than Savor It, and I ended up giving this a 3.5 stars. We follow Loren and Deacon as they inherit this apartment duplex from their grandmothers. Now, once they inherit it, they realize that this building needs to be completely remodeled, and they're not able to do this remodel alone. While Deacon has the construction experience, he lacks the money to get the remodel complete, and Loren has the money in a trust fund but must be married to receive it. So these two enter into a little marriage of convenience as they remodel this building and plan on separating once it's complete and they're able to sell it off. Now, these two do have a past, and as they're forced to live together during the remodel, old feelings start to reignite. So there are a lot of tropes within this story. There's marriage of convenience, forced proximity, second chance romance. So if any of those are your thing, I think this could be a really fun one for you to pick up. It wasn't a book that changed my life, but it does give me a little bit more faith into Tara DeWitt, and I do think I will pick up more from her in the future. Now from there, the very last book that I was able to complete within the readathon was The Spy and I by Tiana Smith. Now, I did read this in less than 4 hours. This is a very quick and easy read. That being said, I don't know if it's a must read. Within the story, we have a case of mistaken identity, and our female main character, Dove, must work with her sister's sexy spy partner, Mendez, in an attempt to save the world. So this is a romantic suspense novel, and it has an insanely similar plotline to Ali Carter's The Blonde Identity, and I really don't think there's any need to read both of them because the plotlines are so similar. I gave Ali Carter's book a 4 stars, and I ended up giving this one a 3. What I did like is that our main character, Dove, did have a cybersecurity background, so she did have valuable insight to provide to the team, which isn't always the case in this type of plot dynamic. That being said, the insta-love and immature nature of her relationship with Mendez was just honestly too much for me to cope with. I just could not get past the absurdity of these two together, given the fact that they didn't know each other at all. And so I was left pretty disappointed at the end of this book. There is a sequel to this, which I am pretty hesitant to pick up. And I would say that if you are interested in this book, maybe try and just pick it up from your library first. Now, this book I did reference in my readathon vlog, however, I kind of did a soft DNF of it throughout the challenge. This is Lightlark by Aster, which is my first book by this author. I would say this is like a YA new adult fantasy novel where every 100 years the island of Lightlark appears to host the centennial event. Now this is a chance for the 6 rulers of this world to come together and try and break the curses set upon their lands. And for our POV, we end up following Isla Crown, who is the ruler of the wildlings attending her first centennial event. Isla really reminded me a lot of either Scarlet from Caraval or Peyton from the Powerless trilogy, both of whom can really annoy me because I overall just find them very immature, naive, and a bit impulsive. Now, the whole characterization of Isla is that she has trained her entire life for the centennial event, and even though that's the case, her decision making throughout this book was truly shocking, and overall I was just so frustrated from her as a character. Additionally, plot-wise, nothing in this book took me by surprise. Nothing in this book was something I had never seen done before. And at the end of the day, I just was not engaged in the storyline and don't think I'll be continuing on with this series. And finally, the last book of July was Direbound by Sable Sorensen. This is a KU fantasy romance where within this world, the king's elite warriors are all bound to these massive direwolves. And to become one of the bonded, you must go through a series of trials and graduate from their training academy. Now, our FMC Marin never dreamed of becoming one of the bonded. However, after a terrible incident with her little sister, she joins the War Academy in an effort to save her. Now, a few comps I would say if you are interested in reading this is you can think of Fourth Wing, except instead of dragons, it's direwolves, with a hint of Throne of Glass magic going on in the background. There are a lot of twists and turns throughout this book, so even though it is pretty long and chunky, I will say that it is pretty well paced. That being said, I saw all of these plot twists coming from a mile away. I am intrigued enough with where we ended off to see where the story goes, but it's definitely not a life-changing read, which was a bit disappointing because how I had heard some other booktubers talk about this book, I thought I was going to be in for the ride of my life. But I will say that if you are new to the fantasy romance genre, this could be a fun one to pick up because the plot twists might take you a little bit more by surprise. And I think the thing that I'm most excited for in the upcoming book is seeing how this relationship dynamic is grown. So I am hopeful and will definitely give the next book that comes out in the series a go. So that is it, y'all. That is the end of my July wrap up. I really hope I didn't yap for too long throughout this video. And I'm gonna do a quick reminder for those who are still hanging around. If you have any fun ideas for how we can celebrate 1,000 subscribers, please let me know. Or another way you could let me know that you've made it to the end of this video is comment down below your favorite book that you read in July. Or if you're feeling a little feisty, maybe comment down below the least favorite book you read in this past month. But for now, this is where I will love you and leave you, so thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe before you leave so that you don't miss any of our upcoming videos, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye, guys!